guys, it's Dr. Drake 63, and I want to thank you for joining me today. What you see before me, all boxed up, is all the things that you need to build a complete, very good quality AR-15 in 5.56. Talked about this, a little bit of a teaser last week when gave you the preview. Said, hey, we're gonna talk about building around this spikes receiver, lower stripped receiver, and kind of teased you a little bit and told you we were going to get into some detail and wasn't sure about all the specifications. Wasn't sure how to do stuff with one hand either, but here you see this lower receiver. This is multi, but this is the starting point. And I decided what I wanted to do was match this up with other high quality parts. So those parts are an upper from Spikes, which we'll talk about in more detail. BCM parts. This particular one is the buffer tube and the buffer spring from BCM. We've got a nice Magpul carbine stock, one of their newer versions, and wanted to try this one out. I had stuff from the junk drawer that I could have used for it, but I wanted to use something kind of nice there. We're going with the H2 on the mid-length, and LBE makes some nice stuff. For my lower build kit, I did go with Spikes. As I'll detail later when I get into cost, we can talk about how I could have saved some money going with a Palmetto State kit. I actually have one coming, and we'll just use that for spare parts or my next build. But we're going to use, for this one, we're going to keep it in the Spikes family. And lastly, we've got a trigger from ALG Defense. Now, this is a standard mil-spec trigger. It's just their QMS, which is called Quality Mil-Spec. It's got a polished sear. It's got a little bit better springs than normal. And what I've found using these in the past is that this trigger is a lot smoother than your standard mil-spec. You don't have that grittiness. Shoots a lot more like a broken-in trigger right out of the box. So those are the parts that we're going to use. I'm going to take a look at them outside of the box here, and then we'll get busy. Stay tuned. Okay, I'm going to talk about cost on this sucker. You can see I brought an apple to hopefully impress the teacher and get an A here. But just looking at the cost here, my Spikes lower receiver stripped costs $95. Okay, that's going to be plus or minus. You know, typically as cheap as I've seen them, you might pay 15, 20 bucks more. The Spikes complete upper, which includes a Spikes bolt carrier group and a charging handle, $531. That is a good deal, and that was through JoBobs. The lower parts kit, which is also Spikes, $45. That includes the grip, that includes your trigger guard, that includes all the springs, detents, and everything you need to complete out your lower, minus the buffer tube and spring and the buffer. I went with the BCM buffer tube and spring. You can get them cheaper, but I wanted to get as good as you can get at 60 bucks. An H2 buffer cost me 40 bucks. I wanted to get a new Magpul MOE stock. I could have done it from spare parts I have, but there's a new style out we'll talk about. That's 57 bucks. And I went with an ALG QMS trigger group. These are the ones that are made and tested by Geisel, and they're mil-spec at 6.5 pounds consistently and very smooth. And that's $48. So my total cost to build a mil-spec rifle, which is of pretty much the highest quality parts and components, $876. Now, keep in mind that if we wanted to get into some nice rail key mod, something like that, you know, the price is going to go up from there. And I went with just the old school handguard. But my savings versus a complete similar Spikes rifle, $100 to $150. The Spikes version that is complete for this, you know, you're going to pay shipping, you're going to pay an FFL transfer, and not only that, on top of everything else, I don't know if the trigger's as good. I know the stock it comes with is definitely not as good. So you've got some upgrades there, but basically we're saving 100 to 150 bucks on something like this. And if I wanted to really cheap it down, I could have got the lower parts kit and the buffer tube, which right there is you're looking at 145 bucks. Could have got that for 90 bucks from Palmetto State. I just decided, hey, I wanted to get stuff that was of a better known quality. So, you know, it had certainly been possible to build this a lot cheaper. So just kind of wanted to show you there. I hope I get a good grade for my math. I'm sure that we're going to have some folks weigh in talking about how I could have saved more money and so forth. But that's the tale of the tape. Okay. Starting to look a little bit more like a rifle than all boxed up, isn't it? Just taking a look at these parts a little bit more. Here's that buffer tube we talked about. It's got the spring. This is a 6-position buffer tube. So, and it's a mil spec, as is this. Now, one thing to watch if you're putting these together, there is what's called commercial spec, which is a little bit different diameter buffer tube, and they do make a little bit different fitting buttstocks to go on commercial spec. I don't know why they ever made commercial spec, to be honest. For people that are kind of serious about building, I've never heard anybody that wanted a commercial spec. And so it kind of reminds me of VHS and Beta. Everybody went with VHS and not Beta. But anyway, make sure that you get matching. Mil spec, commercial. But forget about the commercial, guys. I just don't get that. So here's our buttstock, 6-position adjusting. We'll show you how to put that on. Not a big deal. What I like about it is it's got this nice little attachment here for slings and so forth. Then we have the lower receiver, which we showed you. Now this upper, which you know, we'll get into the cost, but it's these pieces that you see right here were $531. By far the most expensive part of this rifle. Why is that? Well, real simple. It's your most important part. It's going to be your barrel and your bolt carrier group. Now, I like this F-marked A2 front sight for a lot of reasons, and I love the kind of classic look. Now, this is a plastic handguard. You can change this out. You can put a rail on it. You can do a lot of things, and obviously the real trend is to go with a gas block, and then have a floated rail the whole way. That's not what we have here. More of a classic type of rifle, patrol type rifle. But you see that this is completely assembled. So when we're talking about assembling it, I'm not assembling an upper today. Now, this particular firearm is going to be using a barrel, which is 4150 chromalloy vanadium chrome line steel. This is mil spec, guys. This is what the military specs in their rifles. You're going to hear a lot about cold hammer forged these days. You're going to hear a lot about that. And cold hammer forged is a process. It's the way that the rifling is put into the barrels. You'll get arguments all day long. I've had several rifles that have it. The BCM Recce 14 that you've seen me review and talk about a lot is a cold hammer forged barrel, 4150 mil spec steel on this. Probably looking at paying an extra 150 to 200 to have cold hammer forged, and I'm just going to make the contention that you are paying for something that nobody watching this video is going to be able to take advantage of in terms of what it does. And I'll leave it at that. Looking at this bolt carrier group. It's a Spikes M16. The way you can tell is the cutout on this has the full rear piece. I've actually got a video from a while back that talks about the differences. Go back and find that if you're interested. But this is phosphate coated. It has a properly staked gas key, which is important. You don't want this part coming loose, and Loctite isn't a real good answer to that. You want it staked, and what does that mean? That means where you see this metal on the parent piece, is actually protruding into the head of the screw. So that's going to keep it from rotating. So that's what we mean by properly staked. Okay. Inside of this chamber, and you can kind of see it right here just from this outer lining, is chrome lined. Okay. And that keeps it from rusting and helps with wear. But that's basically it. The bolt is a mil-spec bolt made out of the proper type of steel, and you guys can get into all the specs you want. You can also tell that this has been test fired just by seeing the brass ring there. And that's one thing you pay for when you pay for a little bit higher end type of quality. When you get into your Daniel Defense and your BCM and your Spikes and others, is this has been inspected twice before it left the factory. You see 2 different people signing off on it in the first month of 2019, and they're verifying that this works. So it's been inspected, as has the bolt. Magnetic particle inspected, the whole 9 yards. HPT, high pressure tested, you name it. This is a 5.56 barrel, can handle 223. Guys, when you buy a 223 barrel, not a good idea to shoot 5.56 through it because you got a difference in pressure. Looking at this part right here, this is the charging handle. This is as basic as they come. You can get into all sorts of different charging handles that have ambidextrous either side for the release, wider formats that make it easier to grab for guys doing quick mag changes, all sorts. This is just a mil-spec, run-of-the-mill charging handle. Okay. We talked about this ALJ trigger. This, like I said, is from the folks that make Geisel. And then here's your actual parts. Here's all the fun that we're going to have in the video about building the lower. Springs and detents galore. Your magazine release, your takedown pins. All of these things have spring-loaded detents, and that's what the fun is going to be. That's why you see every one of these little drilled holes and cavities has a detent that we get to put in. Some of them are more fun than others. So we go to do that. I'm going to show you one that's already been built just so you know what it's supposed to look like. And one thing I'm going to point out, it's good to have some of the right tools. This goes in your vise, and it fits right in here into your magazine well, so that when you're working on this thing, you've got something to hold it steady. That's going to be real important. The other thing that we're going to do, we're going to use some of this frog tape here, which is some really good stuff. And what we do is we're going to tape the outside of this so that as we're using tools and so forth, punching in roll pins, all that kind of stuff, if we have a little goof, we're not going to leave a big scratch on the surface of this thing. If I'm going to scratch up the surface of this, I want it to be out shooting it, out coyote hunting, something like that. I don't want it to be when I was assembling it. So other tools that come in handy, this is an multi-tool for the AR platform. And the one thing you'll see, you've got a couple things here that are good for working on taking on and taking off muzzle devices. Well, the most valuable one here is this. This is a castle nut wrench, because if you're looking at this thing right here, the first thing you might be saying is, oh my God, how do I tighten this sucker down? Well, it's called a castle nut. You can kind of see why it's got these little indentations, square indentations. Looks like the top of an old English castle. So you've got a wrench that's just for that. If I was not going to photograph this and just put this thing together, I could have this thing together and ready to fire it inside of an hour. No problem. Huge savings? No. Are we really building anything? No. But we're going to do some assembly, and it's kind of a cool thing to do. And I would like to point out, you can build something that looks like this for a heck of a lot less. If you want to go cheaper on parts, and parts kits and things of that nature and materials, you could do this for half of what I'm doing it for. So I'm not trying to show you the cheapest build. I'm trying to do a nice solid AR mil spec build, something I'm going to hang on to and use and shoot. So keep that in mind. This isn't the cheapest way to do it because I haven't bought cheap components, but the sum is only as good as the sum of the parts. One thing I want to point out as well, you see me wearing this JoBobs t-shirt. I purchased the trigger group as well as the complete upper from JoBobs. Go to JoBobs Outfitters online. I've got nothing but good things to say about this company. I don't work for them. They don't sponsor me. I paid full price, and will I'm sure continue to do so. But I always feel like I owe it to you guys to tell you when there's a good product or a good retailer or whatever. JoBobs is great. After researching what I wanted in terms of an upper, I found it on JoBobs. I placed my order on a Monday, had this in my hands on a Wednesday with normal ground service. Now, I'm only a couple states away, may take a day or two longer, but they shipped the same day that I ordered. So that's kind of nice. And free t-shirt with any order over $150. So I'll definitely recommend JoBobs to anybody who's looking. I've also done business in the build world with people like Palmetto State Armory, as well as picking up at a couple local shops that are more in tune to the needs of folks that build ARs and things of that nature. So thought I'd throw that out there, and a high recommendation from DR Drake. Being that these are all Spikes components, I sure do expect them to fit. Be mighty disappointing if they didn't. Let's see what we got here. Nice smooth trigger. Like that trigger quite a bit. Got a little bit of play between the upper and the lower, and I don't know how much of that gets resolved when we pop in a magazine. It's a little bit better. So one thing you get when you get these plastic hand guards, and the way that these are put on with a delta ring and everything else, you're going to get more wobble than you are with the whole rail deal. Not much you can do about that. But we're going to pop a rear sight on this and call it a day. I don't think we want to charge it with any live ammo on it, though. Okay, well, here she is, the finished product. Yep, it's an AR. This is my rifle. There are many like it. You know that saying. What I like about this particular one, as I mentioned, it is made out of good stuff. Good components going into it. Now, can I say that this thing's going to behave and respond and be twice as accurate and twice as reliable and everything else than a rifle that costs a lot less? I can't say that, but I do know that my best odds of having something that is accurate, something that is very functional, something that is durable, is to make sure that it's made out of good stuff to begin with. So based on that, very happy with the way this one turned out. Now it just comes down to shooting it. But I've always been one that enjoys doing stuff with my hands. If you've watched my series of videos going back 200 or so some, I like taking rifles apart. I like working on them. I like taking handguns apart and working on them. All sorts of stuff like that really helps me enjoy my hobby. So this is a beauty, without a doubt. I really like this style of rifle with the older style handguard. Had plenty and built plenty and shot plenty of newer, more modern rifles. The Recce 14 certainly comes to mind. But in terms of just having a good barrel, good trigger fire control system, and something that is fun to shoot, I think we're going to be happy with this. And we will do a shooting report for you and keep you updated. At some point, we're going to probably look at some kind of optics or red dot, something along that line to throw on here. But for starters, we're going to use these iron sights. I've always been a big fan of shooting the AR with iron sights, and as long as you got the ice to do it, it just makes you better at everything else you do and shooting every other kind of gun, in my opinion. So I want to thank you for watching this particular video today. I do have a separate video you can watch which shows me sometimes gracefully, sometimes not, building this lower from the ground up. And when I say building, I do mean assembling a strip lower. And so if you're interested in a long and detailed video, be sure to check that out. Otherwise, I appreciate you watching. As always, this is Dr. Drake 63 saying so long.